Welcome one and all to another episode of Dragon Ball Head Scratchers, and to the first video of 2016, I believe. Now, I know I said I was going to do a big video series where I was going to analyze Resurrection F in a lot of detail, but the problem with that is that I've got college starting up and I've got to study for some big exams. I kind of want to get into the writing side of things where, my fanfiction is concerned, and the problem with the Resurrection F videos is that I kind of want to do them scripted. The first one was scripted. I had this whole, big thing in my head, and I want to do every video like that to avoid situations where I stammer or where I say something wrong. In other words, I want to make those videos actually kind of good. So this is not going to be one of those videos, obviously. This is just going to be me talking, as always, about something that's kind of misrepresented or debated about in the fandom concerning Dragon Ball, and that is the Saiyans. Now, the Saiyans, I think, are probably one of the most unjustifiably loved things about the entire franchise, and not that there's no reason to love them. It's just that I feel that a lot of people have a wrong perception of the Saiyans, either because they kind of don't want to accept the truth, or because of the dub, making them more sympathetic than they really ought to be. And this is going to be me analyzing the Saiyans as they are presented in the Father of Goku special. I'm going to be kind of using that version of Bardock as a stepping stone to bigger things. I will, of course, mention the Dragon Ball Minus version, which is still kind of relevant to this discussion and actually does manage to add certain layers to support my own stance on things. And as you can probably see from the video, my stance is firmly that the Saiyans were fucking bastards. A lot of people think that the Saiyans were this poor species that Frieza one day found and then transformed into vicious murderers, and Vegeta was, a victim of Frieza's, torture, that Frieza did all this stuff to Vegeta to turn him into a bastard, that he did that to all the Saiyans, and then when he felt too afraid of them, he exterminated them all, and that they were just this poor, misunderstood race that didn't deserve what they got. But the Saiyans were not a good people, guys. They were a species of ruthless sociopaths who completely destroyed entire planets, committed countless atrocities across the universe. They murdered men, women, and children with reckless abandon, all because they liked to fight. This is not a poor, misunderstood species that were transformed by Frieza into what we see in the special. These are ruthless, horrible, horrible people who deserved everything they got. And no one kind of represents this gray situation as well as Bardock in the TV special. Not in Minus, not in Heroes, not in Xenoverse, not an episode of Bardock, just the TV special. Because Bardock is the quintessential Saiyan. He represents everything the Saiyans as a species were, almost as well as Vegeta. Although, because Bardock is a lower class Saiyan, he kind of represents sort of the everyman of the Saiyan race. He represents kind of what the rest of them thought like, while Vegeta represents the upper class, the nobility. But both of them kind of serve as the quintessential representations of their species in different ways. And the reason why Bardock represents everything that Saiyans are in the Japanese version of the Father of Goku special is because he is a bastard. He loves his job. He does not give a shit about his son. He doesn't give a shit about the fact that he's, sitting, laughing, and smiling with his buddies, talking, shooting the shit. Well, there's like a mountain of corpses on a completely dead planet that he and his friends just spent the entire night exterminating completely, murdering men, women, children, the elderly, the sick, the helpless, the warriors, everybody. They did not spare a single living soul on planet Kanasa. And while we never get an exact timetable of just how long the Saiyans were under Frieza, the fact of the matter is that they were probably under them for a good few years at the very least, or potentially even decades at worst. But although I do generally think that the Saiyans were for at least like 7 or 8 years under the Saiyans, under Frieza, I'm sorry. And during that time, the Saiyans throughout the years, they went to planets and they completely exterminated them because that's Frieza's MO. He sends teams, not always of Saiyans, sometimes of other species that he's conquered, of strong fighters, basically, to exterminate other planets so that he can conquer them. And it's implied that he sells them, but that's not really part of the manga, and Frieza's Empire is a whole other subject that you can do a whole other video on. But the way it's played up in the manga and even in the anime is that Frieza sells planets that his men exterminate to other species that need them for whatever reason. And the Saiyans love their job. These guys get a kick out of punching somebody's head off. They get a kick out of murdering billions and billions of people and then just going back home to rest for a few days before doing it again. And there is no better scene that represents this in the context of the special than the way Bardock goes about killing Frieza. Because Bardock does not go to kill Frieza the way a lot of people think he do. He doesn't do it to prove to himself and to his son that he's different from Frieza, that he's better, that he's gonna reform the Saiyans. No, like, he's going up there to kill Frieza, to prevent the extermination of his species, and then once that's done, they're basically just going to keep on rampaging across the universe. And this is a very important point that people love to forget, because they want a victim in this situation. They want to have someone that they can hug and cuddle and pretend that they're the victim when there is no victim in this situation in the first place. This is a story about a species of bastards that are going to be exterminated by the galaxy's biggest bastard, and a sole representative of that species just happens to know that, and he's trying to fight back. He's not trying to fight back to reform them. He's not trying to prove to himself or to his son that he's a better man. He's not doing it out of love or compassion. He's just doing it out of a basic need of survival. And if he succeeds, he's just going to keep doing what he does because he's a Saiyan. He likes to fight. And if the Saiyans did defeat Frieza, if Bardock managed to defeat him, I would argue that things would be even worse across the universe without Frieza. Because at least with Frieza there, the Saiyans always knew that there was someone above them, that there was someone looming over them, that there was someone who could keep them in check if they tried to do something. And without Frieza, without that leadership, without that character to hold everything in place, the Saiyans would probably be almost as bad as Majin Buu. They would just go around the universe destroying everything that they possibly could get their hands on. They would just murder even more people for nothing. If at least under Frieza, you could make the argument that, well, by exterminating this planet, the Saiyans might have saved another species that kind of needed someplace to live. And if you really kind of think about that whole situation, you could probably maybe understand, how the Saiyans' selfish actions might actually help somebody, but ultimately their motivation is not noble. They would just continue to wreak havoc and destruction across the universe because that's who the Saiyans are. They're fucking bastards. And the reason why a lot of people tend to victimize the Saiyans, to portray them as this poor species that didn't deserve what they got, who were transformed by the evil meanie Frieza, is because, like I said, the dub, did have some lines where it's implied that Vegeta would never have turned out the way he did if Frieza hadn't commanded him. A lot of people, tend to victimize, and they sort of headcanon this whole thing where Frieza tortured Vegeta, where he did all this kind of stuff to him, but if you watch the special, Vegeta's already a little bastard on his own. Like, he's murdering Cybermen with a smile on his face, and in fact, the last image we see of a 5-year-old Prince Vegeta is him standing in a mountain of corpses, getting a report that his entire species is more or less gone, and the only thing he cares about is getting assigned to a stronger planet where he can get potentially stronger opponents who can entertain him. That's the kind of people the Saiyans were. These guys were not victims. These guys were not, people without an identity or a poor race that were molded into the vicious killers that we know them in. thanks to Frieza. These guys were fucking bastards. Now, I can understand a lot of people's position on this, how even in the face of this kind of evidence and this kind of mentality that they would try to seek out a victim, that they would try to rationalize, oh, well, the Saiyans, they were the victims, because people like to root for the good guys. There's a reason why good versus evil stories are so incredibly popular, because with the good guys, you know who to root for, and with the evil guys, you know who to hate. But in this situation where everybody is pretty much a genocidal lunatic who gets off on blowing the shit out of planets, you kind of gotta see who's the underdog here. And when the scumbags that all get exterminated at the end, it makes sense that people would try to rationalize why they are the quote-unquote good guys of the storyline. Now, this isn't just because of people's need to have victims or to have heroes to root for. The dub is also kind of to blame for this. Now, before you call me a weeaboo or Japanese fanboy or whatever, I love the dub. Dragon Ball is a series that I just love the hell out of to watch in English. It has a great cast and all that, but let's be honest, guys, there's a lot of stuff that the old dub did wrong, and the way it portrays Bardock in the special, it has all these lines where Goku mentally tells him, Father, it's not too late to be different from Frieza, and then the last thing Bardock says to Goku in the dub is, I wish I could have held you one other time, while in the Japanese version, Bardock does not give a shit about Goku. The only time Bardock ever cares about Goku is when he's dying and he sees a projection of the future and he realizes Goku is going to beat Frieza. And then and his last words to Goku are, Kakarot, avenge us, avenge the Saiyans and avenge our pride. You are the one who will beat Frieza. He doesn't tell him he loves him. He doesn't tell him he cares about him. The only thing Bardock sees of Goku in value in the Japanese version is the fact that he knows Goku will become the Super Saiyan and defeat Frieza. He doesn't love his son. He doesn't care about him. He only has any interest in his son in his very last moments because he knows Goku will be useful in avenging the Saiyans at some point down the line. And that is kind of another perfect representation of what the Saiyans were like. These guys were bastards, people. These guys are not victims. They were not helpless. They were not tortured by the meanie Frieza. No, these guys were scumbags. And personally, in a series that already has a lot of black and whites and a lot of good versus evil, a situation like this where it's just one scumbag getting rid of an entire species of pest scumbags is a kind of storyline I can dig. So, guys, what are your thoughts on the Saiyans? Do you still think that they were this poor, victimized species, or do you agree with me in that they were completely, well, not irredeemable, because as we can see with Vegeta, that after a long, long time, a Saiyan who is buying into this mentality can be changed, but I think that a lot of them probably wouldn't be redeemed. So, yeah. Where do you guys stand on this? Do you still guys think that the Saiyans were these poor victims? Or, like I said, do you subscribe to my idea where you think they were just ruthless murderers who pretty much got what they deserved, even if the guy who was, dispensing the quote-unquote justice was pretty much just as bad as